Welcome to the Biometric Update Podcast. I'm your host, Joel McConvey. How much would you let a machine do for you? How much would you let it do autonomously on your behalf? These are the questions driving a growing market for identity governance that applies to AI agents as well as humans. Today's episode features an interview with Alice Sesay Pope, author of The Trust Algorithm: How Leaders Build Trust in Generative AI. After we hear from Alice, I'll chat with Biometric Update Managing Editor Chris Burt about the scaling of the Agentic enterprise and how it's shaping the digital identity sector. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Alice Sesay Pope, author of The Trust Algorithm: How Leaders Build Trust in Generative AI. In her 25-year career, she has led some of the largest customer experience and operations organizations in the world, serving as Global Vice President at Amazon and holding executive positions at Visa, Capital One, and Microsoft, among other companies. Her book, The Trust Algorithm, is available now, and it focuses on something that comes up frequently on the Biometric Update podcast: trust. Specifically, it argues that trust, not technology, is the true currency of the AI era. Welcome, Alice, and thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, JR. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'd like to start kind of high level and ask you to tell me what kind of a transformation we are currently embroiled in with AI.
Right. We're in a revolutionary transformation in that the technology is moving faster than I believe any other technology evolution we've had. And it's more than responding to questions, but now we have Agentic AI that can also take an action on behalf of a customer or person. So in this era, I believe it's going to change some of our roles, most of our roles, in every industry. But because of that, we're also going to think about governance differently than we've thought about it before.
Yeah. And that's something, I want to ask you about. We cover the biometrics and identity verification angle here, and there are increasingly calls to put verification requirements on AI chatbots like Claude. And there's this sort of theory that identity is emerging as the foundational layer for the agentic internet. Right. Is this the case? Are we moving to a point where we need identity as this governance superstructure or substructure for all this agentic activity?
Wow, that's a great question. So initially, when more and more people started using generative AI and agentic solutions, we thought, utilize it, but protect your privacy by not sharing any other identity information. But we have AI models now that want to take an action on behalf of a customer. They want to book a flight for you or manage your calendar, book an Uber for you. In those instances, they also need your credit card information and your personal information. So that is changing. And because of that, we're going to have to rethink how we have the right guardrails for privacy for consumer data.
Do you think we're doomed to lose control of our privacy?
Wow. I hope we're not. I hope we're not. But the more the agentic AI solutions want to take actions on our behalf, we will. So I know just about a month or two ago, I was creating agentic applications on Claude. And then Claude said, do you want me to manage your email box for you and your calendar? And at first I said, yes. And then it said, oh, great. If you give me access, I can read your emails, respond. And I said, oh, no. I did not want to give up that much control. But the technology is evolving so fast, we may get to a point where consumers feel the right guardrails are in place and it makes us so much more comfortable um, that people are willing to do that.
So that's a good segue into a question about compliance, because this is going to become increasingly important. And you've sort of said in your book that compliance frameworks are actually becoming a competitive advantage in AI deployment. Is that true?
It is. And it's because the regulation is arriving so much faster, but it's arriving unevenly in various geographies. So, as we know, EU, the European Union, always has a more robust compliance and regulatory standards that they want organizations to follow. But there will be strong internal frameworks that are going to let companies move confidently everywhere. Enterprise buyers now vet AI vendors on governance maturity, not just capabilities. So as we move forward, because of privacy risks, because an agentic AI could possibly have information, if it's not used appropriately, could cause harm, governance is going to be extremely important, more and more relevant I believe, in every institution that's utilizing generative AI.
Do enterprises know this yet? Do they realize the importance that governance is coming to represent?
I believe some organizations recognize it. They're not quite sure how to execute it, but it's becoming more and more of a topic in boardrooms, as a topic in various operating teams, compliance, legal, but it's broader. I think earlier on, we saw a lot of the compliance, regulatory governance work being conducted mainly by compliance and legal leaders. Now it has to be much broader. It has to start even at the design phase with software engineers, with operators, with marketing, with communication people, just because the stakes and the risks are much higher than before.
Mm-hmm. Where does consumer pressure fit into the picture? How much is consumer demand for trusted AI driving the market for enterprise AI governance?
Yeah, there's going to be great customer demand. It's really interesting. I was reading a Pew Research article and it said that the population of people that are 50 years and under, typically between 20 to 50 years old, leverage agentic AI and AI solutions more than any other demographic. But within that demographic, they trust it less. And I thought that was interesting because I thought it would have been the reverse, that they would have more trust in these solutions. But it makes sense. They recognize that they're hackers. They recognize that once you have your information out there, and think about this: if you type something into a generative AI tool, that data is out there. It's not a private conversation. That data, your personal information, can be utilized to model the large LLM bases. There could be another human on the other side that's looking at it, because before people kind of thought it was a private conversation. It is not. And even the long policies that exist, privacy policies, they don't necessarily protect the consumer. So there's going to be more and more questions for consumers. I'm not sure where it's going to land. Either consumers are going to get more comfortable, but I feel at some point consumers might get more hesitant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, trust really is the core piece, right? It's what everything hinges on. So what can leaders do now to sort of prepare for this new regulatory era?
We have to be very serious about how we're creating our governance models. It can't just be a document that we look at on a quarterly basis. How do we integrate governance at the design phases? How do we ensure that we have accountability? And from an accountability perspective, it also has to be, how do we know when to detect risk faster? Who's accountable? If Agentic AI goes rogue, do we have a clear plan of somebody that can turn it off? So I believe they're high stake actions that are urgent, that maybe weren't urgent in other compliance and regulatory factors before.
So in the one of the beats we cover is age assurance and biometric age assurance regulations. And one of the things that's happening with companies like Meta and X to a lesser degree is that they almost appear to be too big to regulate, because there's no real fine that you can impose on Meta that matters to their bottom line. Do you think this is a concern with AI companies that, OpenAI, for example, already has this massive influence in our culture? Have we handed over the keys, so to speak? And how do we regulate these companies once they have such a huge piece of the pie, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. At some point, there has to be some regulation, and it's, where do we find the right balance? Because if we regulate too much, it will slow down innovation. So we don't want that, because we know that there's value for the innovation. But without regulation, are consumers protected? And as you just mentioned, with different age demographics, there's bias, there's hallucinations, and there's real risk to consumers that I don't believe we have a clear regulatory plan yet. The winners, the people that begin to think about that and think about it in a way that protects consumers without hindering innovation, are going to be the great winners. Yeah. So it almost feels like the best scenario is when corporations are working hand in hand with regulators to find that right sweet spot.
It's interesting, because I sometimes think about the airline industry. And in the early days, they would have been developing regulations just the same. And there's no way now that you'd get someone, even if you showed up and said, I have this really innovative plane that I designed, there are no guarantees. It's completely unregulated. Would you like to take a ride? Most people would probably say, no, it looks cool. Thank you. And I think, are we there with AI? Are we at the point where it's like, this is such a massive risk, and we have to figure out a way to complement it with governance if it's going to be as beneficial as it promises?
That's a tough one. And the reason why it's a tough one is because AI definitely has advantages that are fascinating. I don't know how much you perhaps utilize, but just think about it. Years ago, you could not, if you didn't have an engineering or software background, you probably could not code. But now you have an agentic AI that can code for you. Because of that, product innovation is faster. You can analyze massive loads of data much faster. So there's such a great value proposition that I believe a lot of consumers will be more willing to take the risk. That's my hypothesis. I might be wrong, but I see a lot of people utilizing it.
Yeah.
And they're utilizing it in the back of their minds. They're thinking, wow, am I protected? But then there's so many advantages to it, and they're moving forward and utilizing these tools. And companies are worried, associates are worried, if I don't utilize the capabilities, am I competitive anymore?
Yeah.
And business is going to get more competitive because of the advantages of some of these tools and features.
So is the industry setting itself up, or the economy setting itself up for, a sort of catastrophic event, so to speak, that where suddenly, to the great dismay of one particular company or database, we discover just how risky this is? Are we going to see something like that where, McDonald's goes down because the agents decided to go rogue or something?
Yeah. I hope not. So I don't know if you saw in the news, it was last week, there was an organization that was established called RAISE, RAISE. Did you see that?
I didn't know.
Yeah. So RAISE is an organization of large tech companies, people in the education industry, politicians, a very diverse group of organizations that have come together to rethink AI, to rethink how we're considering implementing AI, what we're thinking about, what the world would think about as it relates to reskilling employees. So I believe, because a lot of the major tech companies are involved within that organization, people would begin to think about how we embrace these tools responsibly, how we govern them, how it impacts the human race, so that it won't be a big disaster like you mentioned. All of a sudden, McDonald's goes down, or worse yet, banks go down and your money is missing, right?
Yeah, or airline, air traffic control, all these things.
Oh, good.
So, before we wrap up, can you maybe give me a couple of key takeaways from your book? What do you want people to walk away from without giving away too much, because they should all read it? What do you think people should take away from it?
We are in a trust recession. Mm-hmm. However, there's so many advantages to AI that we should not be afraid of it. Instead, we need to think about what are the governance models to put in place, what are the right guardrails to put in place, but how are we also thinking about people in the process, developing the right governance models, but also ensuring that we have the right change management plans that consider how do we reskill employees, how do we engage customers, and how do we elevate the experience and the trust of customers as we're launching all these generative AI solutions.
Awesome. Yeah, I think change management is a highly underrated and underutilized sort of strategy for a lot of this stuff. Very important to, explain to people exactly what's happening. So thank you for helping us understand some of it today. I really appreciate, again, you taking your time to share your thoughts with us. And we'll look forward to connecting again down the road, perhaps.
Thank you.
The market for identity governance is changing. What once only needed to apply to human identities increasingly must apply to AI agents tasked with human responsibilities. Where digital ID once implied a digital encapsulation of a human identity, it has shifted. Now, digital identity can be assigned to digital entities, too. Here's my conversation with Biometric Update Managing Editor Chris Burt about where this is all taking the market.
So with me today is Biometric Update Managing Editor Chris Burt to talk a little bit more about the Agentic revolution. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Joel. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad today. Not bad. How about yourself?
Super, thank you.
Great. I spoke this morning to Alice Sesay Pope, author of The Trust Algorithm, How Leaders Build Trust in Generative AI. And her big thesis is that trust, not technology, is the true currency of the AI era. And, it's sort of identity becoming the foundational layer for the agentic internet, and the rise of this market for AI governance and identity governance. So what do you think, what have you been observing in the market over the last, let's say, 6 months, as far as, the changes being driven by the agentic age, so to speak?
Yeah, I think we've seen a fair number of developments of different kinds, and I think it looks to me from a sort of inexpert view that there's more of a direction of travel, let's say, than an actual solid and specific approach that's being landed on. So a couple of the things that I would kind of flag in that regard. One is the release of MCP servers. So we have a couple of or several different digital identity providers releasing servers that are intended to work with model context protocol and build that identity layer into agentic AI. And then a very recent one just this week, we had the City of London amidst a little bit of a, let's say, a chaotic digital identity future in the UK, coming out with their own plan, which or their own recommendations for how digital trust should move forward, and sort of tucked in there. That's the City of London. They call it a digital verification orchestrator. So the idea is to tie together all the different services and capabilities that are going to be in the DVS trust framework and so on. But tucked in there, they have specific references to MCP and ACP. That would be Agent Communication Protocol. So, to that market that you just referred to as, kind of emerging now, as they look at this system that was, I think, mostly designed with people in mind in the UK, they are including that agentic AI layer in their next steps in planning. So, so it's definitely on, and the supply side of the market is, appears to be gearing up to handle it.
It's interesting, right? Because you've got people starting to act on a national level and on a government level, rather than just sort of like private protocols or open source protocols or whatnot. You've got like Estonia, for example, has just decided to assign a digital identity to agents. So, one of my questions is, where does authority ultimately end up lying in these scenarios? Who's going to hold the sort of like, the real truth once everyone starts sort of assigning identities to these agents?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, and so a lot of kind of my own insights to bring to that. But what I will say, what that really sparks for me is a presentation that Michael Schwartz from Glue did at the MCP Dev Summit. He talked about governor modules as the sort of the rules applying mechanism that agentic AI is going to require, and specifically how an MCP gateway kind of acts as a choke point, and therefore we could say, oh well, this is the point at which identity checks will sit, but just applying those checks at a choke point in that way does not really align with zero trust sort of principles that are rightfully taking a very prominent place in thinking about agentic AI and how to secure it and keep it tied to identities, which is to say that, on this view, in order to preserve zero trust throughout an agentic AI ecosystem, or an ecosystem that's fully inclusive of agentic AI, you're going to have quote unquote governor modules enforcing rules all along the path, so to speak, or as Mike puts it, attached to all services. So that would indicate that you're going to have, or on this thinking, you would have essentially a rules review, so maybe an authorization check, which then may feed back into an authentication. Did Joel really say it's okay for this agent to make this purchase or something like that? And then maybe you get, as I was trying to think about how this works, maybe it's maybe you get a pop-up notification and a prompt to use a pass key, so that your biometric bound to the pass key, bound to the agent can then provide that authorization. But to specifically answer your question, that means that the party that's in charge of this ultimately is going to be, or setting the rules, is going to be some combination of regulators, right? And standards or industry bodies, or protocol, the groups creating these protocols. So there are a lot of cooks going to be in the kitchen, I think, over the next little while, especially as different countries, you referred to Estonia, surely a lot of countries are going to want to follow their lead. But I suspect that there's going to be some divergence when we talk about how China or the United States or various regulators in other jurisdictions think of these things. That all suggests to me that things are going to get a lot more hairy before they get sort of streamlined and convenient.
Yeah, definitely. This may be an obvious statement at this point, but do you think it's fair to say now that to be an identity provider is to be a provider of agentic governance? Are those things now sort of inextricably linked?
Yeah, I think that it is fair to say that, or they're becoming inextricably linked, in that whatever kind of identity claims you're backing or credential you're providing is going to have to work with these systems if agents are going to do all the things that those who sell telling us they're going to be able to do. So I guess that kind of, I'm kind of opening the door on a question that might be kind of behind us in a sense. But I think at the same time, if these things are going to work, I wonder if, I wonder if this aligns with the conversation that you were just having previously, is like, do those identity providers simply hook into an ecosystem that that kind of interoperates in a way that they don't necessarily have to do anything different or that much different? The credential, verifiable credential is still just a verifiable credential. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's funny. So I think we can take the question from behind us and put it in front of us, and we'll make it our last question. But and I'll frame it like this. So when I go, searching for information about AI agents, it's almost exclusively fraud prevention providers and companies who are selling these sort of like governance structures, and I wonder if we're sort of missing the core of it, which is like, what are these things actually doing? I keep hearing that they're buying people coats and booking them flights, but I don't think anyone I know is yet using these things to do everyday tasks. Are we still talking very much on an enterprise level? Are we talking about a more fundamentally machine-centric role? is this all just sort of like dust in the wind, so to speak?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you actually hit on, my best guess is kind of a combination of the things that you just mentioned. I do think that the enterprise piece looks to me like it's going to be first in terms of widespread adoption, because, in terms of, if you think about payments, which is relatively thorny because there's money involved, higher assurance is necessary, et cetera, enterprises have sort of repeated purchase agreements and protocols and habits and procedures that at this point, I think in a lot of cases are more labor intensive and sort of red tape entangled than is necessary. And so I can definitely see agents doing a lot more of that work in the sort of shorter to medium term. In the longer term, in terms of consumer adoption and one of us thing, as you say, that I could see only a little further off, and it makes me think of an analogy that in the TV comedy Flight of the Conchords, the guys are contracted in one episode to make a jingle to go in a greeting card, and they ask questions about how it works, and they keep arriving back at it's like a Walkman. It's like a Walkman, and the guys who's buying it says no, it's not like a Walkman. But the salient point there is that it doesn't really matter what's happening, under the cardboard, so to speak. It's just that, this recorded music comes out when you perform this certain action. So I suspect that for you and I and for consumers in general, Agentic AI is going to be something that does things that we're familiar with and is at least somewhat invisible in part of the process. So I guess where I land on that is that we have to be able to transfer the trust that we might have in, say, an online marketplace. I bought something from here before, so it's going to be okay. We have to transfer that trust to agents, so that not only is the marketplace trusted, but my buyer is, my buying agent is trusted as well. And so whenever that is, we can buy our coats with agents, I guess.
Yeah, or at least have them advertised to us by agents, certainly.
Right.
Well, thank you, Chris, for your thoughts and your time, and we'll definitely touch base again.
Thank you, Joel. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to Alice Sesay Pope and Chris Burt for joining us today to talk about the agentic future. And thanks to you for listening. If you enjoy the Biometric Update podcast, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And for all your daily news on biometrics and digital ID, be sure to visit www.biometricupdate.com.